And we are live. Hello, everybody. I'm Andy Pagana, and I'm coming to you from Valorous TV on YouTube and Facebook. And this is our very first live, and we are here with Colonel Randall Larsen and Brigadier General Bill David on the 30th anniversary of the Black Hawk Down event. Colonel Randall Larsen served in both the Army and Air Force for a combined total of 32 years of active duty military service. His flying career began as a 19-year-old Cobra pilot in the 101st Airborne Division. He flew 400 combat missions in Vietnam and was awarded the Distinguished Flyer Cross, the Bronze Star, 17 awards of the Air Medal, 3 with V device for Valor, and the South Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry. He is now the CEO of Randall Larsen Presents, a documentary film company, and the executive producer and director of Black Hawk Down, the Untold Story. And we are also here with Brigadier General Bill David, who served 28 years on active duty in the Army after graduating from West Point in 1975. He was commissioned as an infantry officer and served in a variety of leadership and staff positions in 5 Army divisions. He is a fluent Spanish speaker who served overseas in Panama and Belize. And following his retirement from the Army in 2003, he worked for 16 years as an executive in the aerospace and defense market space, and now provides business development consulting services for a variety of clients. All of his awards and decorations received while on active duty, he is the proudest of the Army Valorous Unit awarded to the 2nd Battalion, 14th Infantry for the actions against a hostile force while deployed to Mogadishu, Somalia, while under his command. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you so much for your service. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Thank you for having us.
Doing great. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, no, thank you guys for doing this. I'm really excited to be here and to talk with you guys. And, I'm a big fan of this film. It's such a moving documentary and very interesting. And, I didn't really know the story about these events. So, watching this was, it's heartbreaking and terrifying. And there's something also so beautiful about it. So, maybe let's get started with first how the film came about.
Well, Andy, General David and I actually shared an office at the University of Pittsburgh in '93. The Army sent Bill, and the Air Force sent me there to spend a year studying national security for a year. And that was shortly after Bill had come back from the Battle of Mogadishu. And I kind of first learned about the story there. And I probably say I learned a bit about it sitting in bars with Bill or whatever. But then we stayed in touch over the times, and I kind of got into the documentary film business there. And I had promised my wife that I wasn't going to make any more. And after my Operation White Coat, I said, okay, I'm retired from that now. And 2 weeks later, General David called and says, there's one more story you got to tell. It's an Untold Stories, and I like untold stories. And I mean, this is an incredible untold story about the men of Task Force 214 from 10th Mountain Division. Their story had never really been told. Everybody kind of knows about Mark Bowden's book and Ridley Scott's movie. And I mean, Ridley Scott's one of my favorite directors, and they did a good job, but it primarily focused, or almost exclusively focused, on the special ops people. And the special ops people, as Bill says in the film, they're the best soldiers we have and everything. They were put in a very difficult position that night, though, and it was up to the soldiers of 10th Mountain Division, Task Force 214. And as I got to know the story better, then I realized that I needed to help tell the story. These soldiers really deserved to have their story told, and I was proud to be able to do it. So,
Bill, this was your idea then to make it into a movie.
Well, it was and it wasn't. There was a group. What actually transpired, and Randy didn't have time to tell the full story, but there were 3 historians out of Southern Illinois University who decided they were going to take on this project documentary because one of the soldiers in 214 that was killed that night was a PFC by the name of Jimmy Martin, who was from a small town near Southern Illinois University. And so these historians, they on their own dime, they went around, they conducted many interviews, to include with me. And when they thought they had a product that was ready for prime time, they said, "Hey, we've got this documentary. Here's a Dropbox link. Would you mind taking a look at it?" And so I looked at it, and I said, "Look," I got back to them. I said, I don't know anything about documentary filmmaking, but I know somebody who does. Would you be interested in me getting you connected to Randy Larsen? And maybe he could be a mentor for you in this project." And then that's how I tossed it over the transom to Randy, who ended up taking the whole thing over. And basically, correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, but I think you used a lot of the raw footage, but it was Randy who put together the story. It was Randy who had the creativity to tell this story that is historically accurate to the nth degree. He knows more about the battle than I do. I think he probably knows more about the battle than any person walking the face of the planet, because he was an absolute fanatic about accuracy. So he took over the project. He developed something that was accurate, and it also became suspenseful, even though you knew the outcome. I think it's impossible to watch this documentary without having some feeling of suspense as to how it's going to turn out. Even though you know how it's going to turn out, you don't know the path that got there. So I'll forever be indebted to Randy. A couple years ago, we were successful in getting this Air Force guy approved as an honorary member of the 14th Infantry Regiment, and he is. And so he's done an incredible service to us. And I think the most important thing is that he has given hundreds of soldiers some degree of validation and closure for their role in a very important event that was heretofore, I wouldn't say overlooked, but the story of how it didn't get into Mark Bowden's book is an interesting story altogether too. And
I would love to know more about that. Actually, I would love to know why. Yeah, because as I'm, watching this documentary, and I've watched it a couple times now. As I'm watching it, I'm like, this is, as a filmmaker myself, all I'm thinking of is like, my God, this is a movie, and I can't even imagine, especially in book form, why this wasn't a major part of what's known about this story.
Deadlines. Deadlines, and you have to go back to the early 90s when the internet was still in its infancy. So the original story, Mark Bowden was a freelance writer, and this story originally broke as a series of articles in the Philadelphia Inquirer in 1994, 1995, and to the extent that things could go viral back in 1994, the story went viral. And the series of articles were based upon Mark's interviews with members of Task Force Ranger, the special ops element. And, the British historian John Keegan has this book out called The Face of Battle. And one of the viewpoints he takes is that, a soldier's view of the battle extends to his senses, his or her senses. You're really pretty ignorant of what's going on in areas that are beyond your personal cognition. So the articles come out, and I know this because I've talked to Mark Bowden, and he has told me this story, so I'm not making it up. So I'm now a colonel, and I'm the garrison commander at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And it's probably, I don't know, don't make me lie, 1994, 95. And I get a call in my office from Mark Bowden. And he sheepishly apologizes to me because he's got this deadline from his publisher, and he's just come upon this new information of the role of 214 infantry. So we do a phone interview, impromptu, that lasted maybe an hour and a half. I got him connected with a couple of other officers and people from the battalion. I think he did phone interviews with them, and he was able to sandwich it in, kind of as a single chapter, I would say almost as an afterthought, but he did the best he could with the time he had available. He was up against that publisher's deadline. And so that was that about that. And, the rest is history, as they say.
So let me add onto that a little bit, because two friends of Bill and I, longtime friends of mine, were technical advisors for Ridley Scott's movie, Black Hawk Down.
Oh.
And a lot more people have seen that one. And it's a superb movie. It captures the essence of urban combat and about Task Force Ranger, the special ops people. But Ridley Scott hired two people that were very involved in this battle to be his technical advisors, and they filmed it for 4 months in Morocco. And that was Lee Van Arsdale, who was the senior Delta Force officer who participated, and Tom Matthews, who was the commander of all the helicopters that night over Mogadishu. And Lee is in my film, in Black Hawk Down, the Untold Story. I wanted him involved. In fact, General Dennis Reimer, former Chief of Staff of the Army, when I started making this film, I called him and said, hey, would you be an advisor and help me with this? And he said, no, Randy, I'm really too busy right now. I got too many projects. But you must get Colonel Lee Van Arsdale involved. And I'm so glad I did. And he played a big role in helping get my movie made and in the battle. But several times when they were filming in Morocco, they would go to Ridley Scott, both Tom and Lee, and say, hey, this is not the way that happened.
Right.
This didn't happen there. This guy didn't do that. And Ridley Scott said, I'm not the History Channel. I'm Hollywood. and like I say, Ridley Scott's one of my favorite directors. He's fabulous. He did a great job with the movie and captured the essence of urban combat. But I was really focused. I spent 18 months making sure I could get all the facts correct. In fact, Bill and I first showed it before it was really done. At the 25th anniversary of the battle up at Fort Drum, 50 veterans from 10th Mountain Division, Task Force 214, came. And we showed an early version of the film. And when we were done, we showed it a couple times up there. And when I sat them down, I said, tell me. I want to make sure the facts are right.
Right.
And like Bill said, too, that Keegan talked about, an infantry soldier's got about 20 meters. That is what they know is going on. But I said, so, okay, from your perspective, what did I get wrong in this film? And after all of them watched it 2 or 3 times, they said, where you said the lost platoon turned at the wrong place? I think your film has it 1 block too early.
So that's it.
That was the only mistake. So we came back here, more CGI, changed where they turned. But that whole thing, I think, is so important in the essence of this battle. And there's a great story about a U.S. senator over on the Fulda Gap back during the Cold War, and he walks up to a young infantry sergeant, and he says, Sergeant, what's your job out here? And that sergeant said, on the last 20 meters of national security. and that's what it is for these young soldiers. And like Bill says in the film, they're 18, 22, 23 years old. They're all just out of high school.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to capture a battle that takes place over 18 hours in 4 different locations. And everybody's kind of got their different perspective. And so to get all that information, and that's it takes a few hours. But I think we captured it. And I think we told the story of these incredible young men from 214.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because that part comes at the end of your movie, basically, when they mention the age of the people and you're showing some photographs. And that hits hard because you're not thinking about that while you're going through this, while you're going through this journey here, and these guys talk about this situation. And then that comes it almost feels like out of nowhere. And it was like, I kind of gasped. Do you guys, but going back, so how do you feel about the Ridley Scott movie then in general?
Well, I agree with Randy. I think the movie does an exceptionally good job of giving the viewers a very realistic sense of the intensity of the battle. And that's my takeaway from the movie. The rest is just, as Randy and I talked about this, I mean, he knows tons more about, filmmaking than I ever will. But, I didn't know there was such a thing as composite characters and,
Right.
the different times you have to hit, in order to, make the movie marketable, and, how much film you have to take to, how many minutes of film you have to take to get 1 minute, of edited product. I mean, I didn't know any of that stuff. So, I'm not gonna sharpshoot Ridley Scott's decision making.
Sure.
He's Academy Award winning filmmaker, right? And
Yeah.
I didn't even stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So,
Yeah.
so
Well, I
there you
was
go.
lucky. I was living in D.C. I got invited to the world premiere of the original Black Hawk Down. So I go to it, and then there's a big after party, and there's a lot of the young Rangers and a few of the Delta Force guys that are there. And so we're down on the Potomac River, and we're talking, and I'm going up to them, and I said, "What do you think?" And they go, "Wow, that was good. I'm glad they did it, but and then they start talking about, wow, we didn't know about composite characters because,
Right.
but like you say, when Andy, about films, how much money, how many millions of dollars do you play? Was it Josh
Hartnett.
Hartnett? Yeah, right. Hartnett.
Hartnett. Yeah, you pay him all that kind of money.
Yeah.
Well, he played Sergeant Eversman, who was when they did the first assault, and then the helicopter gets shot down, and then they get back to the airport before the sun ever goes down, and he never went back out. But in Ridley Scott's version, he's a central character in the entire movie.
Yeah.
And when in Eversman's book, he makes that very clear and whatever. But Ridley Scott, like he said, he's not the History Channel. He is Hollywood, and
Right.
you pay all that money to get a big character. And I know my youngest daughter was really mad at me because I didn't take her to the world premiere because she could have met him. And, and so when you spend that much money on characters, then you got to put them in your movie. And so, but like I said, if I meet Ridley Scott, I'll shake his hand and say, nice job, but you
Right.
captured some of it. And that's what the Rangers told me that night after the premiere. They captured the essence of the battle. What a terrible predicament we were in. And the other reason that I wanted to make this film, let me link back to that, was I wanted to tell the story of the young soldiers from 214. I also wanted to explain the story to the American public, that when you put American soldiers into a terribly dangerous situation, don't provide them the resources that they need. That's the American people who should feel bad about the position we put them in, and why those soldiers died and were wounded. And several months before this battle, a lot of senior military people said, we need some armored personnel carriers, Bradley fighting vehicles, and M1 tanks. Send them over here. And I talked to a bunch of people that were in the battle that said, yeah, if we'd have had those tanks that they asked Secretary of Defense Les Aspin to send over there,
Yeah.
they would have had this whole thing that General David and all those soldiers had to go through those gauntlets of fire. They had an M1 tank. They'd have just driven straight to the crash site, picked up the people, and come back. But because the political leaders put these people in a terrible situation, then it's the American public who has the responsibility. We didn't hold our political leaders responsible. And boy, we've seen that through history. So that's the other reason, Andy, I wanted to tell this story about if we're going to put American soldiers in the field, like General Colin Powell said when he was chairman, use that overwhelming force.
Yeah.
Because when George Herbert Walker Bush first sent the Marines over there in December, they sent an overwhelming force. They had armored vehicles and thousands of people. And the warlords, like cowards, hid. They didn't try to take. But then, 3 or 4 months later, they pull all that heavy force out. And then they leave the Lieutenant Colonel David and a couple hundred guys that were trying to support, what was it, Bill? 21 different UN nations from the UN there to try to do this. Pretty tough situation.
Yeah, when the part in the movie comes and they talk about they requested those vehicles and they were turned down, I literally shouted at the screen. You know, he gets so angry for you guys, and it must be maddening. And you talk about how really Scott's movie really kind of puts you in what it's like. You have a line in your movie that I did the same for me in just one line, and it's where Private Cooper says, "I was sitting, touching the handle on the door and hearing the rounds pinging on the other side of it, knowing that in the very near future someone is going to tell me to get out." And I was floored. I stopped and I listened to it again, and I just kind of watched him say it, little matter of factly, right? And I'm like, man, God bless you guys, but like I can't imagine. And what is the, I don't even know how to ask her or how you could even answer this question. What is the mental strength that you have to have in order to go through and not only keep your cool, but be your best, the best you've ever been?
Well, Bill David can answer that best because he trained them. He trained them, and that's why they perform so well. So, Bill, this one's yours.
Yeah, I make the point in the film that in my task force, it was all male, but now it's male and female, right? Times have changed. So young men and women, and they are young, enlist in the armed forces for a variety of reasons. And not all of those reasons are to defend the flag, so to speak, right? A lot of people, young men and women, come in so they can bankroll a college education, or because they need to get a job with medical benefits, right? And they come from all different walks of life, socioeconomic backgrounds. So it's a very eclectic group that you command when you're commanding a battalion. And a battalion, in round numbers, an infantry battalion will be anywhere between 550 and 700 soldiers. Our infantry battalion was a little bit under 600. And the core of that infantry battalion was 3 rifle companies of infantrymen that had 3 platoons each. So the whole idea, what I learned about training, I really learned from some great mentors over the years about what you really need to focus on in training, and the essence is fundamentals, and fundamentals that will give soldiers confidence in their own ability and in the ability of the unit. So fundamental number 1 is train your soldiers so they can hit what they shoot at. Now that sounds simple, but it's not, because you have to train them in a variety of conditions. Moving, enemy moving, you're moving, the enemy is moving. It's dusk, it's early morning, and you just can't go out to the range and shoot caps at targets. You've got to develop these very challenging programs that by and large in the Army, commanders are left to their own devices to do that. Fundamental number two is you've got to give them confidence in their physical fitness, so that it takes tremendous energy when a soldier gets wounded to drag that soldier to a place of safety.
Right.
If one soldier goes down, you're going to lose two or three more just getting that soldier to a place of safety. And one of the things that I'm most proud of a lot of things about the battalion that night, but one of the things I was really, really proud of is we didn't have many soldiers drop out because of fatigue or dehydration. So you develop a program, a physical training program that focuses on what I would say is combat physical training. And then you've got to put it all together in a collective sort of way, and we did that through live fire exercises. Very demanding, very challenging, as realistic as we could make them. Live fire exercises where we put soldiers in different situations. Myself, Sergeant Major Jerry Counts were right down there with them, and after the exercise we go up to the targets and we count bullet holes. How many times did the target really get hit? And so those were three of the main things that we focused on, and we focused on them. We hammered them again and again and again. And I got kind of sideways with my brigade commander because you got these task lists that you need to train on, and I chose never to train on the defense. It was always like, hey, we need to offensive operations, attack, because there's so many different scenarios for attacking. And I thought if we go anywhere, we're going to be asked to do something offensively. We're probably not going to be asked to, defend the camp, so to speak, against, an invading horde. So those three things really, I think, give the soldiers confidence in themselves, and they know that the soldier to their right and their left has the same capability, because if they didn't, we found a way to move them on to some other vocation.
Right.
Yeah, we need cooks and bottle washers. One other thing I want Bill to talk about is that, in Vietnam and a lot of other, you always hear about friendly fire. Okay, and the Army's got a fancier term they use. Okay, but friendly fire, everybody kind of gets that. And because of that training they did at Fort Drum a couple of years before they went over there, I don't believe that Task Force 214 had a single incident of friendly fire, which is hard to imagine. We're talking about an 18-hour battle, most of it in the darkness, in these streets with people shooting at them from every direction, and not one member of Task Force 214 was wounded or killed by friendly fire. That's incredible to me, from my combat experience and whatever, because friendly fire can be a real thing no matter how well you're trained. But I think that training at Fort Drum played a huge role in that. Bill.
Yeah, I'd say the other thing is there's probably some luck involved there as well, but as Vince Lombardi said, luck is the residue of hard work. And so I won't diminish that. Particularly, but what struck me as being very noteworthy is, there was a big part of that battle where you had a converging force, and Lee Van Arsdale talks about that. Lee Van Arsdale played a critical role in ensuring that A Company, which was the Alpha Company, which was the company that was actually moving to the trapped Rangers and the downed Black Hawk in the Northern Crash site, was moving to a stationary force that was being attacked by a hostile force. So you literally had the opportunity for bullets flying everywhere, 360 degrees. And Lee Van Arsdale played a critical role in helping to control that situation. So the likelihood of fratricide is the word that the Army uses. Okay. So the risk of fratricide was minimized. And Lee did a heck of a lot that was extremely invaluable that night, but that was one of the keys right there. So some luck, but that and the fact that after 18 hours, you're pretty gassed. I mean, adrenaline will carry you only so far. And then once your adrenaline goes, you can get this, almost like a tsunami of fatigue that hits you because your adrenaline is depleted, your entire supply. So, for those soldiers to, keep it up for 18 hours in a very intense and stressful situation, they had to be extremely fit to be able to do that.
And in with that and the lock and bullets flying, one of the guys in the documentary talks about how it was like he equated it to a Looney Tunes cartoon. Well, yeah, the Bullet Car. I wrote that down because that was amazing. I'm like, that's a great title for a movie itself, Bullet Car. No, but he talked about it was like a Looney Tune cartoon where he was like Bugs Bunny, where the bullets would literally be around him everywhere but him. And I think what was incredible about that and that story and how you told this film, one of the reasons it's so powerful is there's no narration, right? There's not much explanation except for a couple sparse title cards, and it's just told by this first-hand account of what's happening. What was the idea behind that to say, this is how we're going to do it? I'm not going to narrate it. I'm just going to it's just going to be very simply the guys recounting the story.
The vast majority of documentary films I have made, you never see or hear me, and that's my goal. Okay, I got a face made for radio. Okay, I get that, and I don't want the film to be about me. And a couple and this one I'm in just a little bit. Right. That kind of set the stage when they first went in.
You do have a great narration voice, though. You could do it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, you can hire me. But I wanted the soldiers to tell the story. And so, I mean, I had to go with about 40 hours of interviews, get it down to 1 hour, and breaking that down to where they're telling their little piece and whatever. I was asked to make a film about wounded warriors for the 10th anniversary commemoration of 9/11. It's called Wounded Warrior Resilient. You can see it for free on my website, RandallLarsenPresents.com. And we filmed for 2 weeks at Walter Reed in the amputee ward. And they were going to show it at the 10th anniversary commemoration of 9/11. And the people that were running it came and said, we can get Tom Hanks to narrate your film. And I'm kind of going like, you mean I'm going to get to meet Tom Hanks? And one of the toughest decisions I ever made with the film, I said no.
Oh my!
I wanted the only people that talk in that film are the wounded warriors themselves. They were talking about how they were in the 8th grade when 9/11 happened, and how they joined the Marines the day they graduated from high school, and they told the stories all the way through and down to when they lost both legs or whatever, and how they then came back. So I think, and it's a challenge, as you can see, when you make a documentary to where you don't really have a narrator, you got those people. But I mean, like, who could tell it better than J.T. Cooper? He's sitting there, and we added some, and you hear the bullets pinging off the personnel carrier, and he's going, oh, and I know Lieutenant Hollis is going to tell me to get out pretty soon. And the bullets are just pinging off of it. And then it stops. Lieutenant Hollis says, get out. And what's J.T. Cooper said? We got out. Right. I mean, who could tell it better than that, huh?
Right.
Then the guy was there.
Oh, smart. So it's been 30 years. Yesterday, I guess, is when it began, right? Duskish.
Well, actually, we left the compound around 2:15 in the afternoon.
Okay.
Because that was the order to move an element to the airfield in case Task Force Ranger needs assistance. And like I mentioned in the film, while we were en route, in case became get here as soon as you can.
Right. So when that changed, do you remember what went through your mind?
Well, when it changed, I didn't really have a good understanding of the situation because we were en route, and I didn't have I hadn't had the opportunity to go inside of the operations center and get kind of a lay down at here's what's actually going on to the best of their knowledge. So en route, I was, of course, it's bad, but you just don't know any of the details. And so once we got to the airfield, I made a beeline dash into the ops center to, get a quick brief and of what's going on and an understanding of what they wanted me to do. And you have this big wave of, holy.
Well, once again,
choose your,
one of the best
choose your
quotes
word,
from the film
right?
is Command Sergeant Major Jerry Counts, and he says when Lieutenant Colonel David came out of that command center and they told him what was going on, Command Sergeant Major Counts says, I looked at Colonel David and I said, oh shit.
That's kind of your reaction. Then you know that you've got this mission, so you don't have a lot of time to, kind of flail and rail, right? You've got to get on with things. So, it was almost fortuitous in that the area where we really were going to meet the Malaysians and the Pakistanis was another maybe 20-minute drive from the operations center at the airfield over to the Newport facility. So during that 20 minutes, doesn't sound like a lot of time, but it can be. If you're sitting on a hot stove, 20 minutes is a long time, right?
Sure.
So that gave me an opportunity to huddle with then Major Mike Ellerby, who was my operations officer, and Command Sergeant Major Counts. We all rode in the same Humvee, and kind of talk through about, okay, what's a concept? How are we gonna tackle this? And that time helped out a lot. So
Well, what would you say is the most, or were some of the most difficult challenges for that night?
Well, first difficult challenge was trying to figure out with precision where the helicopter crash sites were.
Right.
Okay. So, that was number one. It took us 2 stabs to get there. The first stab, like Mike Ellerby said, our boat wasn't big enough. So we ran into a series of ambushes that it was the quickest route to the crash sites, but it was, in 2020 hindsight, it was the route the enemy expected us to take. So they had it pretty well fortified. So pull back, regroup, make a new plan, and as Mike Ellerby said, Mike Ellerby had a very good understanding of what I would say is the human terrain of Mogadishu. A location where it's all clans and tribes, and you can kind of overlay that to some degree on a map. Mike had a much better understanding of where those blobs were and where the safe blobs might be as opposed to where the dangerous blobs might be. So, obviously where the crash sites were, those were dangerous blobs, but there were some safe blobs you could pass through to get there. And so he was much more prescient on that fact than I was. So his recommendation on the route was key to the success. And then, it was like, okay, how do we create this plan so that it can be that is simple and can be understood by soldiers, and at the same time be effective. So, we opted for a plan that ended up having Alpha Company moving north, Charlie Company moving south. Weapons were pointed in different directions. We used a main thoroughfare as kind of a control measure, because we had two different aviation units that were flying, and so that control measure, Tom Matthews was controlling the whole thing, but there was an aviation outfit out of the 10th Mountain Division that was supporting it as well, and so one element worked the south, the other element worked the north, and never cross the line shall you do, right? And so it kept, mitigated the likelihood of an air collision, which would have been a disaster upon another disaster. Right. So, it, kind of in one of my mentors that I had in the Army, taught me an important lesson. He says, success in military operations many times is just, it's like sports. You got to eliminate unforced errors. So, you blitz the passer, you risk getting burnt deep, right? So, trying to minimize errors was key in the creation of that plan. What can we do to minimize errors and make it simple for the soldiers? Because as Drew Meyerowitz, says, I mean, the soldiers were just told about this much, what was going on. Basically, it's get in the APC, we're going to go, and get out when we tell you to get out, we're going to fight. So I don't have an eloquent answer.
Right. No, that works.
You got to do it. You got to do it now, right?
One thing, Andy, I do want to mention, first of all, most people don't know the 4 helicopters were shot down that night. People who've seen the movie and whatever, read the book, okay, Super 6-1 got shot down. That's where the 99 Rangers were around them. And then the second one, where Michael Durant was one of the pilots, that was Super 6-4, and that was where he said they went south. 2 other helicopters got hit by RPGs and barely made it back to the airfield. They basically got shot down and never flew again. That was a vicious night to be in a helicopter. And the helicopter pilots from the 160th, that's the Special Ops helicopter unit there, Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and then the helicopters, the Cobras, which I like the Cobras, obviously, from 10th Mountain Division, they did an incredible job. And a lot of the guys that you see in this film will tell you the helicopters really helped save their butts. One other thing I want to mention is, I don't know, 40, 50 hours of video. Now I got to get it down to 1 hour into a film and have a storyline that makes sense and that communicates the story. But you can't see this. There's a lot of streaming services, Valorous TV, Amazon Prime, all of them and others. But that's all you see is that film, hour and 8 minutes.
Right.
But if you get the DVD, there's all this extra video on there and some incredible stories that just the soldiers telling the stories but didn't fit in my storyline. And so they're on there. And also there's a song by J.T. Cooper. That's the guy who famously said, I ain't dead yet, and also we got to get out. I love JT. But he wrote it. He's at one time he carried an M60 machine guns through the streets of Mogadishu, and now he carries a guitar through the streets of Nashville. He's a very successful singer down there. But he wrote a song called, and if you've seen that song, it's called Jet Lag and Nightmare. And it's about the PTSD of coming home. And JT and others, many soldiers who've been in combat have had to deal with that. And I would I love that song, and JT did such a good job. But there's a lot of extra video in there for people who really want to understand more about what took place and whatever it's in there. And then the last thing is, we were so lucky that General Mark Milley agreed to be in this film. At the time when we interviewed him, he was the 39th Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, and then later on went to become the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who just retired. But he thought this was such an important story,
right,
that he wanted to be in the film. And I tell you what, it's tough to get on the schedule of the Army Chief of Staff, but he made sure that that we could do that, and he was on there. And he's got about 4 or 5 appearances in the film, and like he talks about the people. He mentions Bill as one of the finest battalion commanders he's ever known. That's a pretty good compliment from Chief of Staff of the Army. And but
I used to outrank him.
No, so, what was that, Bill?
Passed me up. So I used to outrank him. Once was a day when I outranked him, but
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Bill had to jack him up one time when Billy was a major. But no. So yeah, I'm just so proud that we got to make this film and tell the guy's story. And so Bill and I are going up next week. We're going to present this at Army War College, and then that's on the 12th of October, and then on the 14th of October, there's something called Army Expo 2023. Which is this huge thing for the Army, and they've asked us to present the film there. So one of these days, Task Force 214 is no longer going to be an untold story. I think eventually most people that are interested in this thing will have heard the story, and at that point in time when Bill and I are in the old soldiers' homes, why, maybe we'll declare the success and get the story told about those young soldiers.
Well, I got to tell you, it's been huge on our channel here, Valorous TV, on YouTube, and it's streaming. So it's really well received. It's one of our most popular video, if not our most popular video. Where can they get the DVD if they want to see some of these extras?
Well, that's probably for you to answer. I know you can order it on Amazon.
Okay.
And at one time, it was carried in 3,000 Walmarts. Wow. And we were quite proud of that. And I want to thank the folks at C3 Communications and Mill Creek that made that happen. We would have never got this story out without y'all.
Well, I gotta say, I'd love to then start exploring taking some of that extra stuff and also posting it out here for the people to see. I think that there's a lot of interest in this story. And, you know, it's funny that you brought that up because my next question was actually going to be, was there stuff that you guys recorded or you look back now and said, oh, I wish we had included this or extra stuff that didn't make it in? And you answered the question before I got a chance to ask. How long did it take you to make the movie?
20 months.
Okay.
From when Bill David first called me, and then I talked to the three folks, Michelle and Adam, and that had done some of the interviews and stuff before, and we're talking and we're going, and I had just promised my wife I was going to retire from documentary films, and then I said, okay, I'm going to do it. It was close to 20 months, and I mean, to get all of the information and try to sort through it, because like I said, you know, an infantry soldier out there can see about 20 meters or less at night, and so they know what they see, and that's what they tell you, and then you got to go, well, wait a minute, this guy said this and that, and to sort it out. But I overused term, but it was definitely a labor of love.
Sure. What's next?
Really enjoyed, and getting to meet the guys at that 25th anniversary. I got to meet 50 of them. I had a guy walk up to me with his son, who was about 26 years old, and he said, you know, every time I told my son about what I did there in Mogadishu, he'd say, Dad, that's not in that movie. And he said, but now he's seen the real movie.
Oh.
And now my son knows what I did that night.
That makes me emotional.
I told him, I said, you know, you just made it worthwhile. 20 months of work.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay. Do you have a documentary coming up next? What's next?
Oh, I don't know. There's several I'd like to make, but we'll see. We'll see. I'll let you know when we get when.
Yeah, please do. So I guess my last question for General David here is: so after 30 years, you're looking back on it. 30 years ago today, you were there. You were in the scrap of it. What's the thing that's most still with you?
Pride. I don't think that ever goes away. And you know, they say that you talk about bonding, and they say that, you know, the strength of the bond is based on the intensity of the shared experience. I'm proud that I'm proud of what we did, but I'm also proud of how that episode enabled a core group of individuals who are very dear to me to stay in contact with each other and to be there for each other. And you know, Randy can attest. I mean, an Army career, you spend 2 or 3 years at a duty station and then you move on, and it's always a revolving, you know, environment. And you make promises to stay in touch with people, but you don't.
Yeah, right.
And you know, maybe at Christmas time you send it. You know, we don't send cards anymore. We send emails, right? So, but because of that event, I've remained in close contact with the Corps, and when I go to 214 reunions and I see the soldiers, it's amazing how many of them I remember by face and name. We've all changed. We've all gained a little weight, lost some hair, you know, whatever. Some people have had health issues, but it's always just such a treat to see someone from that unit who was there then, that I know feels the same bond with their brothers in that unit, maybe stronger today than it was then, because we didn't realize what we really had back then, and it's taken time for that to mature. So it's pride and almost a degree of thankfulness, not thankfulness that this battle took place, but thankful that the effect of being there has had on the camaraderie and the bonding and, you know, all that thing.
Beautiful. Thank you. We got some.
And,
go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say one more thing. And honestly, Randy and I probably wouldn't still be as close as we are. You know?
Yeah, we shared an office in '93. We stayed in touch a little bit. Like he said, you say, oh, we'll stay in touch. And then, you know, you send a Christmas card or whatever. But then this whole experience of making this film has been, we're looking forward to our trip next week up there to tell the story at the Army War College and the Army Education and Heritage Center. So
yeah, and so I feel like, for better or for worse, I'm bonded to Randy for the rest of my life.
Sure. Well, I got to thank you for this film. I was touched by it. I was floored by it and scared by it, and it's beautiful. And you know, just it reaffirms such an appreciation for our armed services and what you guys go through. We have a lot of love here on our YouTube. So Patty Smith says, "Go Randy, you're my hero." Scott Hulton, thumbs up. Thanks for sharing. Jago, good evening, gentlemen. Doug Schmidt, BG, David, and Randy, thank you for doing this tonight. It's always great to hear you guys talk about the film.
Doug's
great, historian of 10th Mountain Division.
Oh,
10th Mountain. So you tell Doug, he has played a great role in helping us get this story out.
Great, thanks, Doug.
Great story.
Let's get Doug on here too, and let's talk to him. I'm sure he's got a lot of interesting stuff to add as well. So we'll have to do that in the future. You know, you can find us. Yeah, so we could find the film right here on Valorous TV YouTube and Facebook. It's also, we're on Sling if you look up Valorous TV, and you know, we have Instagram and TikTok, and we're going to continue to keep, you know, serving the memory of the armed forces, and as long as we can. And I really appreciate you guys coming on and talking about the film, and thank you for everything you've done to keep us safe.
Welcome, Andy.
Andy, thank you, and Annie and Luke and everybody out there, C3, for helping us out here with this.
Yeah, we got a great bunch of group over here at C3. So
Bet.
Let's keep in touch and maybe do this again.
Next year.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us, and we're signing off.
Good night.